He's good. I love Andrew.
All right, while everyone is finishing up, why don't I go ahead and welcome you to this first of our Thursday Night Out speaker series of the season. My name is Nicholas Cassis, and I am part of the clergy team here at Trinity-by-the-Cove. For those of you who don't know me, which is, I don't think anyone in this room. Before we get started, just a few quick comments on the format. We will be recording this talk, and we'll make it available on our website after the event for those who couldn't make it tonight or who want to revisit it at a later time. Rather than our typical format, tonight's event will be a panel discussion with time for your own questions at the end. So if you think of a question, I see some people still have placemats. You can maybe jot the question down during the talk on your placemat, and then we'll have time at the end for you to ask those questions. I'd also like to thank Alex Vance, Rusty Troth, and Bruce McKever, who are on the committee that organizes our speaker series, as well as Steve Palesi, all of whom helped arrange for our panelists to be with us tonight. At least 1 in 5 experience mental health issues in one form or another during the course of their lives. Whether it affects us or those we love, it is an issue that is of concern to us all. The topic is often avoided or stigmatized. Although it's often avoided or stigmatized, the church has a responsibility to understand and respond with love and care to those suffering from poor mental health. To help us better understand some of these issues and how we might best respond as a faith community, we are honored tonight to be joined by 3 wonderful panelists who have all in different ways been caring for those dealing with mental health issues. Nancy Dauphinais currently serves as Chief Operating Officer for David Lawrence Centers. She is a licensed mental health counselor and certified master's level addiction professional. Nancy holds a master's degree in counseling from Florida Gulf Coast University and a bachelor's degree in psychology from Duke University. She currently serves as a member of the FGCU Advisory Council for Counseling Programs, the Healthy Living Advisory Committee of the Greater Naples YMCA, and is the chair of the Community Behavioral Health Advisory Committee. Nancy will be sharing with us a little bit about youth mental health and suicide. Jessica Betten is currently Alumni Director for Justin's Place Recovery Program at St. Matthew's House. She is a graduate of Florida Gulf Coast University with a master's in social work. She is a registered clinical social work intern and is currently working closely with the alumni of Justin's Place post-graduation, as well as current program participants on a day-to-day basis. She is evaluating statistics and looking for ways their recovery program can improve to see a higher overall success rate. Jessica will be drawing on her experience to share about the relationship of mental health to addiction and recovery. And lastly, the Reverend Colette Bachand is chaplain and priest in charge at Penick Village in Southern Pines, North Carolina. She is joining us online. Penick Village is a faith-based continued care retirement community. Prior to her current post, she served as rector of All Saints Episcopal Church in Whitman, Massachusetts, and as a hospice chaplain. In addition to an MDiv degree, Reverend Colette holds a certificate in behavioral health of older adults. She is also the author of Do This, Remembering Me, Spiritual Care for Those with Alzheimer's and Dementia. Reverend Colette is committed to working with clergy and faith communities to encourage dementia awareness and positive spiritual care for those who filled our Sunday schools a generation ago. We are so grateful that each of you has agreed to be with us tonight. Would you please join me in welcoming our panelists? First of all, I'd love to hear from each of you if you'd tell a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the area of ministry that you currently work in. Nancy, why don't we start with you?
Hello.
I have been working at David Lawrence Center for 18 years, and what interested me in the field was family history of substance use and mental health challenges. And then my own experience with anxiety led me to learn more about coping strategies. And when my little ones started in school, I was able to explore the master's degree in counseling and found that I really connected right away with working with individuals that were struggling, and worked in our acute care department as a frontline service worker, behavioral health tech, and then have worked my way up. And I have found that working with those that are struggling and in pain has been an incredible source of fulfillment, and it's a reason to get out of bed every day. And while things have certainly changed over the last 18 years, I think we have more and more individuals that are touched by mental health and addiction, and many of us in this room, and just being able to connect with people authentically and accompany them through that journey and help them find purpose and hope. Can't imagine a better way to spend the day.
Thank you, Jessica.
So my journey in this ministry had begun when I actually began as a resident at St. Matthew's House. I was at the end of myself and ready to get some help for my own addiction. And I actually am a graduate of Justin's Place Recovery Program. Following my time in program, I continued to want to work on myself. And some volunteers at St. Matthew's House had approached me one day and said, "Did you ever think about going into social work?" And I said, "No, I really hadn't." And they said, "You should think about it." And I started to look into it, and I realized that the degree I already had gotten in my addiction allowed me to go right into the master's program of social work. So that's what I did. And I completed my degree and was approached near the end of my schooling by St. Matthew's House regarding helping to create a continuum of care for the program that saved my life. And I sat down and I started discussing what that could look like and what it could do for everybody who completes this program, and the need for continual lifelong care following treatment in the world of recovery. It's paramount to success. So I was able to take on that role, and I've been there almost 2 years now, and I absolutely love the opportunity to give back to the program that has saved my life and helped to save others. So that is how my journey began.
Thank you very much. Reverend Colette. Oops. I think you might be muted still.
Okay, there we go. Sorry.
Perfect.
Good evening to everybody there in Naples, Florida. When I first spoke with Nicholas, he mentioned coming down and being there in person. I had said at the time, didn't know that my schedule could allow that, but since I woke up this morning to 28 degrees here in North Carolina, I sure wish that I had come down to be with you all tonight and kept so. Blessings to your church, and Jessica and Nancy, it's so good to be with you on this really important topic for all of us. So just give your whole parish some praise around talking about this and being engaged in issues of mental health. I got into geriatric care about 20 years ago when I was working as a hospice chaplain, and really started to see the connection between spiritual well-being and aging well, and particularly around families that were going through dementia and losing loved ones to dementia. So I really dug in deep to explore that and just kind of wonder about those connections. I think as a society as a whole, we sometimes the older generation feels very forgotten. And so I was really committed to making sure we had conversations and were able to engage that. I did lose my dad to dementia about 10 years ago now. So it became a personal process too. And so very excited to talk about mental health in older adults, both the challenges and the really hopeful things that go on too. Penick Village has 250 residents in all levels of care, including a dementia care unit. So it's a delight to share those challenges and also the very hopeful things that go on for folks. So thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Nancy, I know that youth mental health issues are central to the mission of David Lawrence Center. What are some of the main issues you're dealing with in that area?
Oh, sure. I just didn't want to forget my notes, so I just put them in a little bit of a slide. So you know who I am, and I didn't want to forget at some point that I do have my cards with my contact information. So if there's anything that you would like to learn more about, you can reach out to me. So that's just to remind you of that. But you can go to the next slide. Thanks. So, right. So I just wanted to give people an overview of David Lawrence Center. Some people know we do addiction work. Some people know we do the crisis unit. Some people think they know we have an office location in Immokalee, and that's all they know about. So just want to make sure folks know that we treat adults and children for addiction and mental health, and we treat all levels of care and addiction and mental health. Oh, don't worry about it. That's okay. That's
As
fine.
close as I can do, sir.
It's okay. It'll just remind me of what I'm trying to say. So so that's just a visual to help you know that we have these different areas of care. We can provide virtual care. We can provide, there you go. You can bring them all in. That's fine.
Okay.
So we treat adults, we treat kids, we 24/7 Baker Act and crisis evaluation. The Baker Act is the mental health commitment and voluntary law here in Florida. It differs from state to state, but what we've really been seeing with children and what makes a lot of news headlines is the increase in what is called the Baker Act for children. And that is children and youth who are at imminent risk of harm to self or others. Usually it's suicidal ideation. It might be homicidal ideation or impulsivity with aggression. And there is some incidents of psychosis and other things where folks are not able to just care for themselves. So they're with us for that. But it's really a lot around suicide. And so that's kind of what I'm going to focus on today. That's what we have been seeing since the pandemic. And even before the pandemic is a marked increase in the number of individuals that are coming to us under the Baker Act from school, from the community, from homes for treatment. And we do a short-term crisis stabilization to make sure they're safe before they're treated and released back to home. I'm not sure if I want to go through the rest now. Yeah, you want to just go through? Okay. So the next thing I wanted to share, if the next slide comes, but if not, that's okay. There we go. So these are some things that I just wanted to leave you with, which is that 20% of children have a mental, emotional, development, or behavioral disorder. That's a lot. That's 1 in 5. It's close to, I mean, it's what you shared. And then you can continue. You can just bring them all up. It's fine. Oops, sorry. I'm sorry. There you go. So 50% of mental health conditions occur by the age of 14. And 75% have their origin before age 24. So we can see how important it is to intervene in the younger, the better. We know that more than 1 million children visit the emergency department for a mental health situation every year. And that has been markedly increasing, especially since the pandemic. And then the first symptoms of issues often the average is it can take 10 years before somebody will actually get proper help. And that is way too long. So we can certainly have further discussion about the various factors, complex factors about why that might be, but that is leading to a delay in recovery. And then I think there was one more. Thank you. You can just bring them all up. That's fine. Okay. So this is just a slide basically about the suicide crisis. So many folks are aware we have an opioid epidemic. We knew when we had COVID, we had the COVID pandemic, we had the opioid epidemic, and we have a suicide pandemic. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for young people. And it's been rising for decades. The American Academy of Pediatrics and these other organizations have declared a national emergency in child and adolescent mental health. You think, I had like my pretzel twister. I just was trying to be informal and formal at the same time. So I kind of missed that. Thank you. So the point here being that when youth are dying, it's 25% are from suicide or the second leading cause of death. Those are two ways of looking at that. But for each suicide death, there may be 100 to 200 attempts. That's 1 out of every 15 high school students reporting attempting suicide each year. 1 out of 53 report the attempt was serious enough to be treated by a doctor or nurse. These are staggering statistics. There is hope and ways that we can respond, and we're not going to walk away just with this. I think it's just important to see how prevalent this has become and why we're talking about it today.
Much. Jessica, you shared about your own story and how you became involved with Justin's Place, and now you're directing the Alumni Association there. What needs in our community is Justin's Place a response to, and what does that response look like?
So Justin's Place responds from basically the very beginning. We partner very closely with David Lawrence Center, might I say, because when they come to us, usually they're still using, myself included. I went through Crossroads before I entered Justin's Place. So we generally partner very closely with them in utilizing their detox center, even their 28-day program, to prepare people to come into our year-long faith-based program. So we definitely need our community partners. We use them 100% throughout the entire care, even the follow-up care. And that's for med management, any therapy services, things of that nature. Although we're a faith-based program, we're very realistic about the fact that there are mental health issues that need to clinically be addressed, and our staff is not all equipped to do that. So we need to use our partners for those things. But as far as our program goes, one participant going through our program from the beginning of the program to the end, not including the alumni program services, is a $50,000 cost just for one participant. We have 812 graduates currently of our program. And, it is not a cheap feat to put them through it, but we do not ask for that cost out of the people who are attending our program. We run that on our grants and donations in order to operate. It's only $1,000 for somebody to enter a year-long program at St. Matthew's House, which is amazing. You don't find that in recovery programs. The first month of the program is really where they are being checked for motivation. Then they go into a discovery track period where they are doing the deep work within themselves and their faith, in their step work, in the recovery program aspect of it. And then on the tail end of it, we have our transitional track where they are in part-time employment, part-time program, where they're still doing classes and finishing the end of their program while we transition them back into the real world per se. We do have transitional housing that other recovery programs generally do not offer, that can last for up to 2 years for our graduates. We have a apartment complex where they can live. We also have a gated community called Justin's Village that they can live in. So we have all that follow-up care. Up until 2022, we did not have the Alumni Association, which had just been started to provide support following that treatment. So when they're in the transitional housing, we now have a relapse prevention plan that we provide them with while they're in program. During their time at the end of program, when they complete that, is where I come in and I meet them. And they know me throughout their time, but this is where they really get to know me, and we're looking at their goals moving forward. We focus on legal goals, spiritual goals, financial goals, educational goals. What do you want to do in the next 18 months following graduation from this program? And after I'll go through that plan with them and their case manager till it's complete. And then following their graduation, I am following up with all graduates in 3-month increments up to 18 months out of program for support. At that time is where we're finding people who are reaching out that may not have reached out before. I'm struggling. I'm glad you called. Or just people that were planning on enrolling in school. We have scholarships for program graduates that allow them to attend college. And I am tasked with helping them enroll in that. Helping them understand there's life skills series that I provide to the alumni to understand credit, to understand budgeting, to understand investing when they get to that point, trying to support in life skills what they did not have when they got to the door of St. Matthew's House. While they were in their active addictions, they are not, productive members of society. We're trying to help them do that. And that includes on every different front. A lot of them have legal issues they have to handle, getting their driver's license back. We're there to help them do all of that didn't get done while they were in program with us and focusing on the hard internal work that they needed to be doing. And then we've also just recently brought in a family restoration program. We've kind of looked at the recovery program and what needs to happen to best support our participants of that program. And first it was a continuum of care following completion of program. And then it became, we've got all these family relationships that need repairing. Whether it be getting custody back of their children, redeveloping relationship with lost family members that may have been destroyed in their addictions. And now we have a family restoration program director working on those aspects of the program participants' experience from the very beginning of their time with us. So there's a lot of wraparound services that it has turned into throughout the years of being in existence. But as time goes on, the need continues to grow. The need for more beds. I mean, we've got waiting lists for both the men and women's program. I think that's all I've got.
There's plenty there.
Yeah.
So bear with us. What we're going to do is you have to kind of keep tracking with 3 different tracks as we go along, right? So hopefully it'll become clearer as we go. Reverend Colette, it seems like we all know someone suffering with dementia or just with the changes associated with aging. Would you share a little bit about your ministry in this area, and in particular, what it might look like to provide spiritual care to those with dementia or going through the aging process more generally?
Nicholas is absolutely right. When I do some presentations, I often ask those gathered, who here knows somebody or has a family member or loves somebody who's suffering from dementia? And generally speaking, every hand goes up in a room. There's a phrase being used right now that's called the silver tsunami, which means the baby boomers who are coming into the aging systems are in huge waves of people. And the question that we generally start asking is, how prepared are we as a society to tend to and care for those people? It's certainly a question I hope most churches are asking themselves right now in terms of how they're prepared to care for those who are aging in the communities. You know, there's so many struggles that families who have a loved one with dementia go through, and I could make a list that would include things like isolation. Oftentimes a couple, for example, who might have been active in their church for 40 years, but now one has dementia. Oftentimes you see them stop coming because it's either too hard to get there, or they're worried their loved one might have some behavior issues in the middle of the service and yell something like, "The sermon's boring. When is it going to be over?"
It's not too unusual.
True, but so isolation becomes a big part, and that leads to all kinds of, as you can imagine, problems for both the caregiver and the person with dementia. So huge numbers coming into the healthcare system as our baby boomers begin to age out. And another thing that is sometimes really a challenge for the aging population, both those with dementia and others, is that talking about issues of mental health just isn't something a generation ago did. And I think of my daughters who are in their 20s, and Lord knows they speak very openly about every kind of challenge. Their friends were always like that too. But those who are in the 80s and 90s now, talking about mental health just you didn't share that. You kept it locked up. And so you see people who are aging now and never have had a chance to kind of unpack sometimes some really hard things that have happened in their life. And oftentimes you see people with dementia who start reliving things that happened in their childhood or their teen years. So those things can really be a challenge. I love to invite parishes to think about ways that they can include their aging population to fight off this sense of isolation so often that people have as they become less able to get to church. You so often hear the older folks saying that they just feel forgotten by society. And so sort of how do we change that? And how do we if nobody likes to talk about aging, right? I mean, we all are fighting it. We all want to be younger than we are, but how do we become positive people as we age? And that's really some of the work that we do. I think of things like technology, and for so much of the older population, they're really just being left behind because it's just too hard to do. And if they don't have a 20-year-old granddaughter living down the road, just being able to set up a bank account online and those things just become real struggle that makes them feel less useful, less engaged, perhaps battling a sense of purpose and meaning. And so it's a very different world for these folks. And for the families, so dementia is the 6th leading cause right now of older adults. And we know those numbers are going to skyrocket over the next 10 years. So a big challenge for our society is how do we care for, families are scattered. It's not like it was a generation ago when people lived near each other. And so you have an older adult living in Florida by themselves. They've got children in Colorado, New York, and Texas, but they visit twice a year. So how prepared are we to care for these folks? I'm not sure if that answers the exact question, but there's lots more to say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So listening to each of you talk about some of the mental health struggles in your own areas of work and ministry, those that people in our community, our families are dealing with, it's tempting to throw up our hands in despair. Where do you each see hope?
Okay, so now we're cooking with gas because I got my slides here, so I don't have to look behind me. So you can go ahead if you don't mind. And there is hope. And I was also thinking, if I am going to go off script just a little bit, not to make anyone nervous, but I was hearing so many themes of in common with the three of us. I think that addiction and dementia and aging and older adult behavioral health issues, as well as our youth mental health issues, isolation is such a feature of that. Even in a crowded room, feeling alone, feeling like nobody gets us, that we are alone, feeling shame, things going on in our life that we're ashamed about, whether it's as we're aging or when we're forgetting things, or our behaviors are changing and we don't understand what's going on. That's happening also with children as they're getting older, and also in addiction, we get very ashamed. And so I think that it's very interesting to hear this. This is a great panel to have these three issues, because it's really about being human and the challenges that we have when we're in emotional pain. So I wanted to make sure that I share that suicide, which was my my area of focus today. It's a very complex problem, but it's often preventable. That doesn't mean it's always preventable, but it's okay. But it can be preventable. And so the message is that with awareness and with some action, we can make a difference in preventing suicide for others. There is a myth that talking about suicide will be contagious and make other people more likely to kill themselves or die by suicide. What we know is that with the exception of some ways that media might report on suicide, which can have an impact, caring communication with loved ones or individuals about what we're noticing and seeing about their behavior changes can make a huge impact, because it reduces isolation. It helps people know they're not alone and that there is help. So there are community resources that I'm bringing some flyers for everybody here today. If they're interested, or you always can reach out to me. Just like we teach first aid and CPR, and we have defibrillators, probably and everywhere, there's mental health first aid. And there's ways to learn to recognize signs and symptoms of struggle, and how to learn how to care in a caring way, reach out to someone and broach that conversation, which can sound scary, but is so important to offer that life preserver to someone. And there's also QPR, which is a brief suicide prevention intervention that you can learn. It's question, persuade, refer, but it's a training that you can take. We offer mental health first aid and QPR through the David Lawrence Center for free. and it is meant to be remembered like CPR in that it's that essential. And then educating yourself about risk factors. You know, I was listening to Reverend share some of the risk factors, or the warning signs, I should say, of a developing problem, and learning about those, as well as how to strengthen protective factors, makes a difference in preventing suicide. So there's a lot also that you can learn and educate yourself about the importance of reducing lethal means in your own homes, or educating family about that for folks who may be at risk. And these are simple steps such as properly discarding of unused medication and other things that you may think you would never be around anyone who might go in your medicine cabinet and take some of your medication. And that's true for addiction as well. You would be surprised, people coming in your home that are visitors that know to check the medicine cabinet and stockpile pills, or know who in the family has a firearm and how to access firearms. And so firearms, that's really important as well. So there's strategies you can learn to be a better, to help manage lethal means. And then learning about other resources that are out there, such as 988, which was meant to, you know, it's the suicide prevention lifeline that was formerly called the suicide prevention lifeline. Now it's the mental health crisis line. It was 1-800-273-TALK, and you would see this everywhere. Well, who in a crisis is going to remember 1-800-273-TALK? Not a lot of people. You can text and call 988 24/7, and that has been rolled out nationally. We're now about 20 months after launch of 988, and it's getting better and better as some of the as some of the technology is improving. And we do answer those calls 2 days a week at David Lawrence Center as well. So lots of resources. And before I pass the mic, some things that I brought. I think the next slide shows a flyer that I did bring. There's some really great one-pagers we're trying to get out into the community through the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and others that are just really great, short, quick things that you can kind of arm yourself with so that you feel more comfortable having a difficult conversation with someone who might be struggling. And it's more important to express care and reach out, even if you don't have the perfect words, than to let people stay in isolation. And we know that this kind of outreach has saved lives. We see it every day. And so I want you to be a part of that.
Thank you very much.
So as far as now that you've touched on it, you brought something up to me as far as the isolation goes. You know, one of my favorite things that I've heard in as far as addiction goes is the opposite of addiction. Addiction is connection. We need the fellowship. We need the people around us. We need the support network. People do not recover from addiction or mental health issues, like you just said, without the support of other people generally. I mean, you need somebody else. You need that help around you. The chances of you all sitting in here this evening and not having addiction or mental health affecting you or a family member personally is very, very slim. Most of you in here probably have somebody you care about, or yourself included, that is struggling with this. So as far as resources in the community, 12-step programs for people in their addictions. However, they do exist also for family members. I mean, there's Al-Anon. That is a great tool for if you have a loved one who is currently active in their addiction. There are behaviors that you can change yourself to support that person that you probably don't even realize you might be doing things that are enabling their behaviors that you may learn about in Al-Anon and are able to possibly help save your loved one's life. But in the meantime, your own sanity and be able to operate and live your life and try to help them the best way you know how through the tools you'll gain there. In addition to, what was the phone number you just gave? 988. There's 211. You can also call 211, which is United Way, and let them know what the issue is you're dealing with, and they'll try to find you resources in the area. They'll ask your zip code, they'll ask you what the issue is you are facing, and they'll be able to give you resources for whatever it is, mental health, addiction, no matter what it is that you are dealing with. United Way will try to provide you some resources for that. But as far as there being hope, I'm seeing it every day with what I'm doing over at St. Matthew's House. Some of the things that I do for that connection part that I just talked about is the socialization and events that we do to keep everybody connected, and to see a bunch of people who were hopeless in their addictions, be able to go do things. Last year we went and we had 3 plane loads of addicts in recovery, living life, jumping out of planes together. 3 planefuls of us went and jumped and skydived together. We go camping. We have a camping trip coming up in 2 weeks. We do all sorts of things. We go to Christian music festivals together. We create all these things to keep everybody connected and to keep us relying on one another so that the recovery journey continues. Because as soon as the isolation starts, the addiction is going to begin soon after. And that happens with mental health as well. So just continuing in that momentum of relying on one another as a community is paramount to us being successful and being able to keep helping more people.
Thank you. Reverend Colette.
When I think of hope for people struggling with dementia and their loved ones and families, the most hopeful place that we have to look, which is just right in our own backyards, which is their faith and their connection with something greater. That's the neat thing about what you all are doing. And as you think about how you would want to respond to families that are caring for a loved one with dementia, because you are the great news is you all already have everything you need to help provide spiritual care, to help that person to feel connected to faith, to God. And you don't need any special training. You don't need a committee. You don't need to raise money to do this. You all already have church and faith. When I was working as a hospice chaplain years ago, I had started experimenting with how to engage people with Alzheimer's and dementia in spiritual care. And one of the things that I started doing was similar to a Montessori school kind of thing, which is bringing tangible things, crosses and prayer books and things that people could hold, and little communion kits and those sort of visual reminders of faith, finding that really worked well. And at one point I went to speak to the care partners of the hospice patients that I was working with. So these were their wives or spouses or their children of the people with dementia. And so we're sitting at this big long table, and I'm talking about what I do when I visit, how I bring, picture books and all kinds of prompts when I visit with their loved ones to help reconnect. And I'm going on and on. I'm talking about what I do. And I look down the end of the table, and there's one woman sitting there and she's crying. And so I paused and I said, "Could I ask you what your tears are about?" And she said, "Thank you for doing that." She said, "I always feel like everybody else has given up on them." And I think that just spoke huge volumes to me about what a great impact the smallest, what was it, Mother Teresa said, do small acts with great love. The smallest of gift that we give to these people is so appreciated. And I think that's where the hope is. The church, you have prayers, you have music, you have each other, and it's really just the courage to go out and be with people who are suffering with dementia and sort of being the face of God in that moment. And when you see somebody who hasn't spoken in a long time or barely opens their eyes, but you start singing Amazing Grace or How Great Thou Art, and they join you and they're suddenly there. It's just such a profound moment that makes such a difference in their lives. And I think overall, with regard to aging in general, people really aren't afraid to talk as much as they used to be about those challenges. You see a lot more positive aging sort of things in the news or programs about positive aging. And, even with dementia care, more and more things like dementia-friendly communities being established. One of the work that I was doing before I came to North Carolina was working with congregations so a church like yours, how do you become a dementia-friendly congregation? What does that mean? And those are really great things. They're really easy to do and just have such a great change. And overall too, I think people are starting to train healthcare workers, doctor's office, caregivers in first responders in how to identify people with dementia. So it's a really positive thing in a type of care that a generation ago we just didn't have for these folks. So there are really hope-filled things that we can do, and there's going to be lots of opportunities to do them.
Of course.
I just want to say one more thing that at least gives me hope. I hope it gives you hope as well. Is this event, and looking out and seeing that we're having this conversation. I was driving here from another event to raise awareness at Moorings Park about the opioid epidemic and other issues with illegal drugs that Mayor of Naples was hosting this afternoon with the sheriff. So I went from there to here and driving down and watching all the folks walking to the sunset. And I thought, oh, you could go watch the sunset on this nice, cool evening. Or I'm like, I wonder how many people are going to be here, and look at this room and the fact that you're all here and listening, and you want to learn more, and you're engaged, and that your parish supports this. This is a huge sign of hope. And it's, at least it gives me hope to keep doing what I'm doing. So thanks.
Well, everything that you all do gives us a lot of great hope. So thank you for all that you do. I'm sure there are people in the audience who have questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and I'm going to try to make this so that Reverend Colette can see as well. All right. I saw Jeannie's hand first.
I'm old, so I may have missed this in your presentations, but what is attributing to this surging percentage of children? What do we need to watch for with our children, our grandchildren?
Well, I was watching a very interesting documentary. It's not for the faint of heart, so do your due diligence before you watch it, but it is called Childhood 2.0, and it's a recent documentary that actually shows some interesting graphs that show the rise of mental health disturbance with smartphones, and then smartphones plus social media, and the fact that it's in so many different ways impacting. It's a huge experiment that's underway. It's changing our brains in ways that we never anticipated. There is a lot of neuroscience to explain this in terms of how it's actually triggering addiction and reward centers in the brain, because when you're on social media, it's like a slot machine, because you scroll and you look for posts, and every fifth post or eighth post, you get a little bit like of a giggle, or you get a shot of reinforcement because somebody liked your picture, or you saw something funny, or you didn't feel alone because you saw something that you liked. So you're getting this positive reinforcement. At the same time, it's intermittent, and you're also getting negative reinforcement and punishment by looking at things that may be bullying, they may be stigmatizing, they may be exposure to things that you had no idea how prolific internet pornography and nudity and other things are out there. And so this is a very eye-opening, as I said, not for the faint of heart, but important documentary called Childhood 2.0, where it interviews teens and parents that have come up in this generation of social media and smartphones, and saying how normal it is that the different issues of cyberbullying, you're feeling more and more alone, yet nothing gets turned off. I mean, you used to leave school, and if you had a bully at school, at least maybe they'd follow you on the way home, but you'd have a little bit of respite when you were at home. Maybe now it's continuing, and it's thousands of people posting on your posts that might be harassing. So there's just sources of challenge. We had certainly an impact from the pandemic. Kids were not meant to learn on screens. They missed critical development in social skills, life skills, stress on the family and the parenting but that was really, this was starting before the pandemic. It was certainly exacerbated, and it's continuing. And this documentary made a very interesting point about, when cars were introduced, it was an amazing technological advance and it's improved our lives in many ways. And there were tons of fatalities at first as we were figuring this out and how to make them safer. And there still are a lot of fatalities, but we don't say just get rid of the cars. So the solution can't be to get rid of the smartphone or to get rid of all social media. We're going to have to figure it out as a society, how to protect our children better, because it's a problem. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that, but that's what I got.
Thank you. Another question?
So it sounds as though what's really important is the connection between one another, whether it's between the grandparent and the suicidal grandchild, or the friend who is beginning to have dementia. So I guess those are my two, like if you were the friend or the grandparent, like if you're the grandparent, like what are the warning signals that you can advise your child? Because they're all having trouble with COVID. So, and then the other thing is, so then you find out that you're either noticing or your good friend is diagnosed with dementia. So there are two different questions, really. Sorry, I'm taking 2 points, but those are my two questions.
May I suggest that Reverend Colette gets to first crack at this one, and then I have a couple thoughts for the children one.
Perfect.
You know, when I was listening to that, I just kept hearing, just show up, you know, don't have the courage to just show up. I think that for both those scenarios, both the young adult who's struggling with mental health and the friend just diagnosed with dementia, I think if we as the friend, as the grandparent, just could have the courage to show up, that's just such a huge first step and can make such a difference. It's so hard to do that because I think we feel helpless. Like, if I go see my friend with dementia, what am I going to say? Like, what am I going to do? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I see symptoms in my friend with dementia that I think I'm having? This is terrifying. Or same thing with the young adult, you know, what if I say the wrong thing and it upsets them? Or so we go through all these what ifs in our heads, and sometimes those things create such fear in us that we feel like we can't do anything. So I guess my just big answer would just be, just have the courage to show up, you know, and even if it's the grandchild, just being able to say, hey, I noticed that you seem sad this week. I love you, I'm here. Well, the friend with dementia, gee, that must be really frightening. I'm here. Just show up. Just have the courage to show up.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. I think in learning to listen non-judgmentally, I think that when somebody is struggling, we struggle with them. It's painful to watch. And so we move very quickly to trying to fix the situation or even inadvertently judge the situation. And I think that you know, a person who's struggling can smell or sniff judgment a mile away in your body language. So it's show up with an open heart, show up with a listening heart, show up as a presence that can hold space, but not fix or judge, and build that connection little by little. And so sometimes it may mean I'm not even going to try to talk about anything yet. I'm going to accompany you and find ways to spend time with you. And if the only way I can spend time is on technology, which I'm already saying is not the best thing, it might be FaceTime with a grandchild. It might be a text message each day to let them know that you're still thinking about them and you're still thinking about them and you're proud of them and that you love them. And then, you know, if there's areas to express concern, you know, warning signs are when your spidey sense, your grandma sense, your mom sense tells you that something's not right. You're probably right. And yes, there can be a challenge distinguishing between, well, is this normal teenage, whatever, normal teenage angst, or is this a mental health condition? Well, you know, normal teenage angst isn't so fun and either. So the same approach is going to work with both. You're not going to hurt anything. You're going to build rapport. You're investing in that relationship. And non-judgmental presence. Sometimes it can be very easy to rush to, oh, you don't have anything to be sad about, or, at least if you find yourself in, well, at least this, you're trying to look at the bright side, the person's going to shut down because you're not hearing my pain. You're not seeing my pain. And sometimes we can think, oh, well, it's all drama, or it's every week it's another crisis. Okay, well, not being able to cope with a crisis. I saw this a lot in this documentary. That's kind of what's missing, is learning distress tolerance, and wishing it away or pretending it's not there is not a way to learn distress tolerance. These are skills that we probably learned in different ways in our earlier generations through different experiences that a lot of the current generations have not had. And so they're used to, when they feel uncomfortable, completely distracting themselves with something in the phone. That is not an effective interpersonal skill. It is not an effective emotional regulation skill. That's not an effective distress tolerance skill. So I think it's just maybe having that compassion and, patience and love, love and prayer, love and prayer. So.
Colette, did that trigger a thought? It looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I don't know if this is helpful for everybody there. I was recently reading a book called It's Okay to Not Be Okay, or It's Okay You're Not Okay. It's a book on grief and loss, but she offers this really great strategy that I just would like to share with everybody, whether it's trying to have a conversation with your teenage grandson or your spouse with dementia. And it's 3 little phrases that I've just found so helpful, whatever the situation is, when you're trying to just be present with somebody who's suffering with something. She says, just say these 3 words, these 3 phrases. That's hard. I love you. I'm here. That's hard. I love you. I'm here. And I just think those 3 phrases, no matter what you're trying to help somebody through, acknowledge that is hard, but I love you. I'm here. Huge words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a week ago, we were all watching on our TV the mass shooting in Lewiston, Maine play out. And my question for Nancy is, it seems in retrospect, there were a lot of warning signs. Did you have any thoughts of how this guy fell through the cracks and this took place, this happened?
So, each state and each community is a little bit different in terms of how, or a lot different in terms of how they manage emerging situations. So what I would do is maybe focus on how we would address something like that here in our community, and offer some hope in that, each state's involuntary commitment and process for what the threshold is to force somebody into treatment if they're not willing to go or not able to determine for themselves. So what I can say is that in Collier County, the sheriff is extremely supportive, and more than supportive, but he espouses an approach that is early intervention and diversion. And we actually have social workers from David Lawrence Center that are embedded in the sheriff's office. And they also have trained counselors in the dispatch center, the 911 dispatch center. But we have a behavioral health bureau dedicated to at-risk individuals in the community that may be at high risk, so that we can look at things like risk protection orders. So if somebody is at risk and they have access to a firearm, to temporarily remove the firearms, to mandate involuntary examination for psychiatric illness, and then potentially court order treatment, either outpatient or inpatient. And I think, I pray that would look different in our community, and that I know that our leaders in our community are committed to that vision. I also want to make sure to say that when there is a tragedy such as the one that we just went through, and so many others, the language, becomes, is this mental health that's causing all of these mass shootings? Is it guns, gun control, et cetera, et cetera? And I think it's just important to remember that statistically, there are 2 suicides for every 1 homicide. Okay, so we have a lot of conversation going on around mass shootings, and probably not as much around suicide. Secondly, individuals with serious mental illness, as it appears, I won't speak to this individual, but as we know that is often, a factor, it's untreated mental illness. And secondly, individuals with serious mental illness are vastly more likely to be the victim of a violent crime than to be the perpetrator. And so I think it's also important to keep that in the narrative, that while we need to do everything that we can to utilize while protecting civil liberties, an individual's freedom of movement, and having due process for commitment to psychiatric care and restraining somebody's movement of, through involuntary commitment, we also need to have these other conversations, a bigger conversation. So that's a tough question. So
That was a tough question. You handled it very well. Well, I'm mindful of all of your time. I'm so glad that you all were willing to spend this time with us tonight. With such a big topic, I knew the time was going to fly by, especially with such wonderful panelists. And indeed, we are just about out of time. But I do want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. And a big thank you to each of our panelists for joining us tonight. Thank you for raising our awareness of these issues, for sharing some of the wonderful work that each of you do and are doing in our communities, and for giving us some ideas of what we might do as a community to help cooperate with you all. A quick note to the regulars for Thursday nights: we will be having Evensong next week, but Evensong only because we'll be setting up for the Christmas market in the parish hall. So if you come on out, don't expect dinner, just Evensong. Let's close with a word of prayer. O blessed Lord, you ministered to all who came to you. Look with compassion upon all who through struggles with mental health have had their health diminished or their freedoms lost. Restore to them the assurance of your unfailing mercy. Remove from them the fears that beset them. Strengthen them in the work of recovery. And to those who care for them, give patient understanding and persevering love. All this we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you all very much. And thank you so much, Colette.
I have some materials if anybody's interested.
Power. Colette, I'm going to go ahead and close out, but thank you so much for all of your contributions tonight. Appreciate it.